everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Key Trends for Specialty Trade Contractors, Optimizing Productivity Amid Workforce Shortage. Before we get started, I would like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. You have joined the presentation in listening mode using your computer speaker by default. If you have issues hearing us, please be sure to use an Ethernet connection or move to an area with stronger Wi-Fi. Shutting down other applications on your device will also open up more bandwidth. You will have the opportunity to submit text questions to today's presenters by typing in the chat panel or question panel of the control panel. Please feel free to submit your questions at any time during the presentation, and we will collect these and address them at the end of today's event. Today's webinar is being recorded, and you will receive a follow-up email with a link to the recording. I would now like to introduce Steve Jones of Dodge Construction Network and Brian Davis of Procore. Turning over to you, Steve.
Great, thank you, Sarah. Welcome everybody, and thanks for sharing some attention with us today. I'm Steve Jones. I head up the Industry Insights Research Group here at Dodge. I've been in the construction industry my whole career. I did 20 years in architecture and engineering. I did a few years with a big tech company called Primavera, and now I've been here at Dodge for the last 20 years running our Industry Insights Research Group. Hopefully you're aware of a lot of the things which we produce and publish. These are free to you, all at construction.com under resources. They're sponsored by companies like Procore and others who want us to go out and do the kind of quantitative research to help everybody figure out what is it that I can be doing better to generate the most value, right? With me today is Brian Davis. We worked on a project together for Procore, which we're talking about today. But Brian, why don't you tell the folks a little about yourself?
Yeah, hi everybody, and just want to first thank you for joining us. I know you all have very busy projects that you're working on, and really appreciate you taking the time out to join us. Yeah, so my background is I actually come from construction. I grew up in construction, and then later on worked for a glass and glazer and a general contractor in the pre-construction department. Came to Procore a couple years ago and have been focused in the marketing department, specifically working with specialty contractors. Again, that's my background, and helping them identify ways to connect the dots between the challenges they're facing and, of course, the solutions we offer at Procore.
Thanks, Brian. So as you all can imagine, Brian is talking to and engaging with contractors all over the country all the time. And so as I'll share with you some of the findings that we've had in our research studies about workforce and how folks are dealing with that, Brian's going to kind of give the color commentary about what he's hearing really from the front lines in the street. So what we're going to go through today is our view of what the current situation is based on our research, what we're seeing from the research in terms of some of those impacts that contractors are experiencing because of the workforce situation, what approaches they're taking to try and mitigate this and get ahead of it and control it and reduce its negative impacts. And then we'll close up with some of the key takeaways we think are worthwhile for you all to be thinking about in terms of how to deal with it in your own companies. So that current situation, the construction economy, so what we're all involved in here, if you look at, these are the numbers, the dollar value and billions of the construction starts across all the segments in the whole US construction economy. Going back to 2010, when we were coming out of the Great Recession, we have had a really pretty terrific period over that 10 years, a very sustained kind of post-recession growth. We went from that 435 billion at its low point to, I mean, really almost twice that much, 862. I mean, it really came back very easily, steadily, strong. It's been a great time to be in the business. COVID had a bit of a downturn, not huge. There's some sectors like travel, entertainment, hotels, and things really suffered more than others did. Housing actually boomed. Quite interesting, the mixed impact that COVID had as opposed to the kind of global crush that the recession had. But boy, I got to tell you, for the last 2 years, coming out of COVID, especially driven by growth in housing and some of the other segments, it's been a very good economy. I mean, we actually passed $1 trillion last year. And we're seeing that that's going to keep going in a positive direction for the next couple of years, right? So it's looking to us from our economic viewpoint as if this is a good, strong industry to be involved in. There'll be a lot of work for everybody, which is terrific news for the owners of construction companies, the managers in construction companies, but those who have to do the work, it's just another tidal wave of business coming at an already stressed and strained workforce to get the work done. We at this point are facing a record number of job openings. I know if we were in a room and I could get a show of hands from all of you to how many of you have job openings, it would be everybody. The amount of work that's available now and is going to continue to come on stream is going to require more and more people. We do a civil industry study every quarter called the Civil Quarterly. Throughout the presentation today, I'll have these QR codes. And so you can point your phone right at that, the camera in your phone, and it'll give you a link directly to download these reports. They're all free. In this case, several companies chip in and have us do these. But we just do a deep dive into what's going on in the civil sector, which is, as all of you know, about to experience an enormous amount of growth because of the infrastructure funding. At any rate, you can see every 6 months, we ask how you're doing in terms of your workforce. Do you need to hire skilled workers? And you can see over the last 4 times we've done that, which is a 2-year period, it just keeps getting more and more and more that people are having a high need to hire skilled workers. At the same time, it is getting increasingly difficult to find skilled workers. I mean, you look at the last study we did right at the end of last year, we published it the first quarter of this year, 2% are saying they got no problem at all. I'd like to know who they are, whether they're growing people in a back room or what, because it's tough. Also, there's an issue of skill matching, which is getting progressively worse and much faster progressively worse, where people say the skill levels of what is available to me don't match what we need. Then we ask people, are you expecting that that's going to get better in the next 6 months? You can see a few people think it might get better, 10%, 12%, but a full third think it's going to get worse. Everybody else says it's going to stay the same, which is not good. It's still a tough situation, but a third of people think it's going to get even worse than it is now. And that's going to impact the cost. Right? To what degree do you think it's going to be more expensive when you do find someone who has the skills that you need and who is available and willing to work for you to be able to afford them, right? So it's going to get more expensive. So in that civil space specifically, we do ask which of the trades are the most difficult to find. And for civil players, concrete and site work, excavation, foundation, I mean, those are fundamental being able to do your work, and those are really, really hard. Those are the hardest ones to find people. So just imagine there's this tsunami of work coming in, especially in the civil space. We just don't have the people to do it, and it's really hard to find them. Meanwhile, on the supply side, we are just producing fewer human beings in this country. The household formation growth is slowing down, which means that there is no longer term fix on the horizon with more people coming to be available to work. If anything, there's going to be more of a fight for people coming into the workforce to work in other places than construction. You'll see this a lot today. This is the report that Brian and I worked on, where we wanted to take a very specific look just at specialty contractors and what the kind of key business issues they're wrestling with. Again, this QR code, you'll see it here, you'll see it again throughout, but if you want to get a free copy of this report, just point your cell phone camera at that, and it'll download immediately for you. In this report, we looked at the issues that are driving profitability and eroding profitability. Then we looked separately at all the workforce issues, and we're going to talk mostly about those today, and we also looked at the technology issues. So this is an interesting report that covers a lot of topics, but digging specifically today to the workforce aspect. One of the things we asked about was how many of your current workforce is likely to retire in the next 5 years. Honestly, I thought we might see 8, maybe 10%, maybe 12 if it was really bad. It's 33%. All right, so we can't find enough people today. There aren't a whole lot more coming in the pipeline, and we're going to age out a third of the workforce in the next 5 years. And it's worse with the bigger companies. Brian, I'm sure you've got some perspective from all the folks that you're talking to all the time on this issue. What are you seeing out there?
Yeah, this is like you, Steve. I was shocked when I saw how big this number was, and it's hard when you're seeing that pressure from both ends. We don't have the same volume of people coming in, and of course we're losing a lot of people as they retire out, and we'll get more into this as we move through this presentation. But really, what I'm seeing a lot of people having to do is look inwardly into their organization and just kind of accepting the facts of the situation, which is we do need, and we're going to talk about this, but like we do need good practices in place to recruit talent, and we do need good practices in place to retain talent. But what I'm finding more and more people kind of facing this reality of the most important thing we can focus on is how do we make sure that the people we do have are more productive. And of course, that's when we have conversations around technology and other things, but really doubling down on that. Whereas in the past, a lot of times we would increase overtime hours and we would have people work on the weekends, and those options are kind of evaporating. And so people trying to figure out how they can get by and do the same or more with less, because the work's also growing, as you indicated as well. So it's not like the work is shrinking and there's fewer labor, and so yeah, really productivity and efficiency is the key, and we'll see some examples of that throughout some other slides you have prepared.
Yeah. So here's what we've learned about how this is playing out on projects for people and what impacts they're experiencing. Again, on the civil side, here's the QR code. You can get a hold of this report if you want to. Look at how many people are saying they can't meet schedule. They can't meet schedule because they don't have the people to get the work done. That is a huge number, 3/4. So what are they doing? Well, look at the second one. They're just putting in higher bids, because if I can get more money, maybe I can throw more money at the harder to find but more expensive people that I need to add. And third, the thing that's growing fastest, from 50 to 51 to 58%, they're just turning down work. I was talking to an owner a couple of weeks ago who put out a bid, Midwestern city, a firehouse renovation, nice sized job. They typically would get 30 bids for that. They got 1 bid, and it was twice what the budget was. Right? This is not helping the industry. This is tough. So we asked, all right, how many of your projects are being negatively impacted by this, right? Is this just a few of your projects? This is all of them. Here's the percentage that said that they're getting, that at least half their projects are suffering because they don't have labor. And look at what it is for steel. Well, it's moving towards 2/3 for the poor guys in steel. And then we get into, all right, so what are the specific aspects where you're getting hurt? And as we saw before, project delays, number one, and project costs, of course, going up with that. The ability to actually respond, right? People are starting to turn work down, or they're jacking up their numbers. Sadly to say, and worker health and safety is suffering from it. That is really tragic. The quality of work suffers, and then this horribly toxic rework. Brian, I know you've got some probably other things that you're seeing here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's and I think the important, because these topics come up all the time with when I speak with customers, and as we talk to prospective customers, and really just the market in general. Because a lot of the work that I do isn't even just directly with customers, but also trying to understand what subs and trades, especially the contractors, are facing. But what's important here, and this of course is the challenge that all specialty contractors face, is when you look at this stack of challenges you're facing here, it's like, okay, well, what's in my control and what's out of my control? There's only so much you can do always to control project delays and things like that. But the one that comes up a lot is that one at the bottom, which is rework. And there's a lot of rework that occurs out there that is within, of course, the control of the specialty contractor. And as I've talked to customers and prospective customers, one of the biggest things that they're facing right now with the condensed schedules and the reduced labor and the increase of projects is it's really exposing cracks in their communication process. And there's so much there's a lot of people out there that are really recognizing that and doubling down and focusing on how do we improve our communication process. And the two big areas that they're really looking at is, of course, documents. So like document storage and using the most recent documents and creating easy access to those documents. And then the second thing, of course, is improving the efficiency of actual like verbal communication between the field and the office, and how do we make that better? And that area of communication, specifically on those 2 points, is where I'm seeing a lot of people trying to address the things that they have under their control within rework specifically, and trying to reduce that, because that's the last thing you want is rework to escalate when you already don't have enough people to do the work that you are scoped to, that you have to get done, and you add more work on top of that. Right. And so this idea of organization, process improvement, communication, a lot of the real kind of aware companies that I work with, I'm seeing them focus on that.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up rework, because we see it as so toxic in every study that we do. We did in this particular study, again, if you want to download it, you'll get more detail on it here. In the profitability section, we said, what is it that's actually driving your profit margins down? And you can see across the 5 trades that we talked to, what percent of margin loss rework represents. I mean, look at the steel guys. 34% say that's the number one factor eroding their profit margins. More than 60% of their margin loss they can attribute to rework. Mechanical close behind that. I mean, this is a really serious issue. And to your point about communication, you add a stressed environment where everybody's stretched and got too much to do. What's going to happen to communication? It's going to suffer. Mm-hmm. So what are people doing? Like, what are we seeing people are doing? And Brian's going to weigh in and share some of the things that he's seeing folks doing and trying to deal with this, or even to get ahead of it. And in this study, we broke it down into 2 basic types of things you're doing with people themselves, and then things you're doing at the whole company strategy level. So in terms of that, personnel measures, when we ask folks, and here you'll see it broken down by the smaller companies under 10 million to the medium to the large, to the very large at 200 million or more, what are the things that you're doing to try to counter the negative impacts that you're experiencing from all of this? So to your point earlier, obviously a lot of focus on, we just got to do a better job of pulling people in, okay? And yes, we agree with that, although there's other things which can probably and should probably augment that. But I'll share with you what I'm hearing when I have conversations with a lot of folks, and Brian will weigh in with his thoughts about what they're doing around that whole issue. First thing I'm hearing that a lot of companies are doing, which is showing good results, is they're surveying their existing employees. They're actually leaning in and asking, how is it that we can, A, make you, keep you here and keep you from leaving, or keep you from taking a higher paying job across the street, but how is it that we can actually make your work life better here? That wasn't necessarily always thought of. There has tended to be a feeling like, hey, I'm employing you and you need me more than I need you, but that shoe is on the other foot now, right? So they're actually taking the time to survey. And plus, this is a people business. These are human beings. It's nice to know that management actually values your opinion and wants you to feel more appreciated and engaged in your company. Another thing that just is so important is get out of the office and get out on the job site, right? Have the senior leaders in your organization on the job site celebrating, recognizing that top talent, where they are and where they are every day, right? Show up, be there, right? There's nothing like that. This, again, I can't stress this enough. This is a people business, right? If you want to engage folks and have them really ready to run up the hill for you, it's really important to have the leader on the job site. And then it's not just money, right? Think about all the non-wage components. I was at a conference a couple of weeks ago where this was a specific focus, is what are the non-wage components that people are working with in order to engage retention of the existing employees, right? Autonomy, flexibility, support, a career path, work-life balance. How is it you can retain who you've already got much more effectively? Any other thoughts on that in terms of retention, Brian?
Yeah, it's funny, I wasn't thinking about planning on sharing this story, but I'll share a really quick one. Because on this topic of like employee wellness, again, going back to what I was saying before, and I'll touch on these points a couple of times, because I think they're important. But again, recruiting, retention, and productivity, like these, from what I've seen, really are the key ingredients to getting closer to solving this labor challenge that everybody's facing. And so the one thing I want to share this quick story is this is something that's kind of near and dear to my heart when we start to talk about like employee well-being. And from my past, I was working at a general contractor a while ago, and I was in the pre-construction department, and we were pursuing this project. And it was, we've all been in this seat before, where like you're pursuing this big project, tons of money, we need this job, stress is at its peak. And there was this coworker of mine, and he and I were good friends. We worked well together, but there was the stress had just got to us, and there was this point where he and I were engaged in an argument, and I'm a pretty low key person, but it was funny because afterwards, as we were kind of talking about things, he's like, "Man, you were so mad." He's like, "I actually thought you were going to hit me." And for those that know me well, know that like that is not who I am at all. Like that is not my personality. And it was interesting because it was a moment where it forced me to pause and go, wow, what's happening? Like what's happening to me? How is the stress of construction changing the fabric of who I am? And I think there are a lot of people in this industry that are looking at that and are seeing the inherent problems in that. And so when we talk about, how to protect yourself in the future and how to survive these trends within construction, we can't emphasize enough the importance of what I'm seeing really aware companies out there do is focusing on wellness, focusing on mental health and creating an atmosphere that's inviting. And we'll get more into this, but I think that's really important. And that was definitely something that surfaced in this survey that we did.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up this issue of employee well-being. I'll take a little side trip here and let you all know, again, this is another one of our civil quarterlies, the most recent one. And here's the QR code for it. We did a deep dive specifically into how both engineers and contractors in that space are addressing mental health issues. There's also a really good angle on that in our most recent safety study. And again, this is the QR for our safety study. We do one of these every 2 years for CPWR. We do a whole nationwide study on the status of safety management. And we started getting in last time to the mental health as an issue that is just crucial in safety. And so please take a look at that. And we're in the field right now with the survey for what will be the 2023 edition of this. And I'll give you a sneak peek with CPWR's permission on some of the findings we're already getting back from the survey now. Over 50% of contractors say they'd like to have educational materials, whether it's toolbox talks or infographics or whatever, on mental health, suicide prevention, and opioid misuse. And when we asked them about the topics that they most feel they need to learn more about, that was number one, 20 percentage points above the next highest topics, which were ladder safety and fall prevention, that are huge for safety, right? This was 20 percentage points above. People are realizing now how critically important this is and how it has been largely ignored up until this point. So back to this again. The next one, the next most frequent was that external look in terms of bringing in new players. What I'm hearing and seeing from talking to folks in the industry is that there is a shift now towards, and the Rework America Alliance, I want you to take note of that. You can just put that into Google and it'll take you right there. They have a lot of guidelines around thinking about things in terms of skills, not credentials. This conference I was at last week, McKinsey was one of the co-presenters with me, and they showed their analysis of what labor categories are going to be most in demand across all sectors in the next 5 years. Number one was laborers. Number two is superintendents, but number one was just laborers. Now think of how many people are out there who could probably, based on what else they've done, and maybe they've never been a construction laborer, but based on what they've done in their life so far, they could probably do a pretty doggone good job at that. So think about who they are and what life skills and other employment skills they bring, as opposed to looking for somebody who can come in and say, yeah, I did that exact thing for this company that you've heard of before, right? So skills-based rather than credentials-based. And then consider non-traditional sources of talent. Women, minorities. We are right now 88% men and 89% white in this industry in the US. Veteran transformation, formerly incarcerated programs. There's a lot of programs out there that you can get engaged with, again, to try and find people who do a great job in our industry. And then there's a lot of effort now on starting early to build your own pipeline. Partnerships with colleges, universities, even high schools. All right, you can have a great life in construction without going to college, right? Bring people in from high school who aren't necessarily college bound and can have a terrific job. At this conference I was at 2 weeks ago, people were saying, hey, I bought my first house when I was 23. Friends of mine who went to college couldn't do it till they're in their 30s, right? It's a good career. So begin that pipeline early. Before I leave that, Brian, any other thoughts that you guys are seeing from Procore about ways to add to recruiting?
Yeah, this is a really interesting topic, and I've kind of been looking at some other reports recently that have opened up my eyes to some different ideas. And when I look at our customers, I see these trends. But it's interesting because there's this quote from Peter Drucker I love, and he says that in times of turbulence, it's not the turbulence we should fear, but to act with yesterday's logic. And when you look at what's happening in the construction industry right now, we are experiencing great change and great turbulence. And so to kind of follow the mantra that many of us in construction have followed for many, many years, which is, well, we've always done it this way, and it's always worked. Well, the game has changed. And, that middle bullet there, you've got a group of people who don't want to do things the way they've always been done. You've got a group of people there across different segments that are wanting to change and are wanting to innovate. And I was looking at a report recently done by NAWIC, and NAWIC polled 600 of their members, and of course they're all women in construction, and it was like 80% of them said, I am excited to use technology and I feel like technology will make my job easier and better. And so if you are looking at your organization and you're saying we need to evolve, we need to change, and we do need to operate with new logic and new thinking, well, there's an untapped resource of workers out there who are willing to come and work for you if you are thinking with tomorrow's logic and not yesterday's. And when I look at our customers right now that are just doing an incredible job of using tools like Procore, not just Procore, but Procore and other technology tools to be more efficient with their labor and their workforce, I see a lot of women, I see a lot of minorities, I see a lot of people in the construction industry that are looking at it through new eyes. And so I think that, this isn't just a diversity play. I think that it's a very smart and strategic direction that a lot of companies are taking to bring in new perspectives in this industry. In addition to those that bring many years of knowledge and experience. And I think the two working together is a fantastic combination.
Yep. Again, this is a people business, and you get the right people together, you can really work
Yeah.
magic. The fortunately least too popular, although these are the top four most popular, are not scalable at all. I mean, they're just addressing symptoms. Just more overtime and going out and trying somehow to use temporary labor services. Neither one of those really get to the root of the problem in any meaningful way, and especially the overtime one, because interestingly, in this same report, when we asked contractors, what are the top incidents, top causes for your safety incidents? Oh, look at there, overtime. Oh boy. Yeah, this is really not the scalable approach. Brian, I'm sure you guys agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, look, I know that nobody is sitting here on this call or anywhere in any corner of this industry are they saying, yeah, we love overtime, because it's expensive, it erodes your margin, it stresses you out your people, it usually, if you're doing overtime, it's because the project's behind. And so and I know that there are inherent challenges here that make it difficult to overcome. But again, this is why, like, we get back to one of these big themes of mine as I look through this, when I look at this and think, okay, productivity and efficiency, how are you going to get more productive? How are you going to get more efficient? And the companies that we're seeing getting there are those that are using tools that they haven't used before, technology, better defined processes, better training programs, smarter bidding, utilizing data and analytics in a smart and actually effective way. And so the answers are out there. It is hard, because it does take that time to kind of pause some of the things that you're doing and search for them. But to Steve's point, like, this continuing to, like, use this mallet of overtime, it's not scalable, and I don't see it. I see it being even more problematic in the future environment that we see ahead of us in construction. Some of the things that Steve alluded to earlier.
Yeah, because there's so much of it, we were actually asked to do this report for a company called Versatile. They're the folks who have the camera and sensors on the tower crane. So they're watching everything everybody does on the site in minute detail and have an AI engine to analyze it. And this report, again, here's the QR code. Planned overtime can be a very functional tool in your toolkit if it's done intentionally and in a planned way. Unplanned overtime is the most toxic thing you could possibly engage in, to all the points that Brian just made. And they're at the point where now they can help you understand that if a certain activity takes place before 9:30 in the morning, you are now guaranteed to have unplanned overtime, right? Because they're seeing how everything's moving on the site, exactly what everybody's doing on every day of the entire project. And they have that AI engine to help analyze that for efficiency. So there are a lot of good ways, a lot of good technologies out there that you can apply to put you much more in control. And I think that's a lot of the issue. It's so much of the time, overtime represents a loss of control. So what are companies doing at the corporate level, at the company strategy level? Here again, broken out like the small, medium, large, and very large companies in this report. I'll start with, again, I think what is the least scalable of all of these is more strategic partnerships with other contractors. You don't have enough people to do a job. They don't have enough people to do a job. All right, let's get together and we can scrape up enough people to do the job. Okay, that's a Band-Aid, but it doesn't necessarily really bring a solution to the industry or as any kind of a long-term fix to things. I mean, this is just heading towards a direction where basically one big construction company is going to do everything for everybody, which is not where it's all going, right? So that one's the least strategic, I think, of all of them. This one, on the other hand, though, is huge. The use of offsite construction, it's exploding all over the country and all over the world, frankly, at this point. It's a really, really exciting time to be looking at that. And we did some deep dive into that in this study. We took the folks who were engaged in it in some way. We said, all right, how many folks right now can say that over half their revenue is coming from their offsite construction activities? And the green is the current across all those, and the blue is what they think it's going to be 12 months from now. Definitely growing for everybody. Brian, what are you guys seeing out there?
Yeah, this is a topic that's actually near and dear to my heart. I mean, as a lot of you saw in my intro earlier, I have a glass and glazing background, and so we had a massive prefabrication facility. We also did architectural panels, and so we did, all of our metal panel work in our shop as well. And so personally, I saw with that company I was at, as we invested more in offsite construction and in prefabrication, I saw the significant benefits to our team. And I do see a correlation across companies that are innovative from a tech standpoint and are searching for ways to be innovative in prefab. I do see a correlation with those types of companies, or with companies that are kind of working on both. And so again, I think so much of this comes back to how do we get more efficient with the people that we have. We all know all the benefits of offsite construction. It's typically safer, better quality control, better conditions. Typically labor isn't as expensive in a shop than in a field. And so there's all of those benefits, but I think if it's not currently on your radar, it should be, simply from the fact of it's a step towards being able to get more done with the same amount or even fewer people. And I think that's why it's so important that it's nestled within this conversation we're having right now.
Right, and it gives you more control. Yeah, I'll take a little side trip with everybody for a moment here. This is we do these deep dive studies into prefab and modular, and this is the most recent one that we did. So please, here's the QR code for it, but I'll share with you some of the findings that we had, which I think support this connection to labor. We looked at prefab separately from modular because they're very different and they're driven by different things. So I'll share with you both of those. When we asked people, what factors drove you to get involved in prefab? And you can see here, driven most of by trades, even more than GCs, it was labor productivity, safer working conditions, and dealing with their workforce shortages, right? And then we said, all right, once you started doing that, how did that work out for you? On the left there, you see there's responses from GCs, and on the right, responses from trade contractors. How many said that either they had a medium positive impact, a high, or a very high, the darkest shade, positive impact from it? Huge numbers. And specifically, when you look at that productivity side, you see that huge numbers. Great productivity, especially on the trade side, and great safety. 31% of the trade contractors reported very high impacts on better safety, right? So it really, really works. We did the same thing for modular construction. We said, why'd you get into it? And here it was driven more from the GC side, although very strong for the trades as well. Again, labor productivity, safer working conditions, and dealing with those workforce shortages. And when we said, all right, how's it been working for you? We got the same sort of really, really strong results. I mean, 99% of the GCs were at least medium, high, or very high. Productivity gains, trades the same way, and the safety numbers were outstanding. Almost 40% of the trade contractors were saying very high positive impact on our safety, right? So these are very valuable. Offsite is a super valuable place to be putting effort and focus for your company right now. And then the last two, I put these together, either construction technology to improve the productivity, right? Do more with less, which to Brian's point here, this is the key benefit here for getting into technology, is how to make more, get more productivity out of the resources that you know you're going to have, and the use of job site automation to an increased degree. Obviously, there is a huge universe of construction technology and processes available out there, and more every day. But when you look at them all, a lot of these are very operational. What about workers? You know, we're not necessarily seeing a whole lot here for workers. And so one of the things that we asked about in the study that Brian and I worked on together is, what percentage of contractors are either considering, planning, or already underway with tech for safety? That was very encouraging. You can see these numbers are averaging in the 70s here between the large and the small. And the larger companies aren't that much bigger than the small companies. Usually when we do these things, we'll see the small companies are half of what the large companies are, but it's not true here, right? The small and medium companies are almost right up there with the big companies in investing in all these technologies specifically for safety. This was so encouraging to see. I was thrilled about this. But when we went one level further and said, well, what about workforce management technology, right? Oh, how many of you are using the software that's available to you to actually manage your workforce? Your people are the single most important asset you have. You're applying to tech to all these other things. Are you applying tech to that? And not so much. Half. Steel folks are a little bit ahead. Concrete lag a bit here, but then with the breakdown here between the blue and the green is how many people are using one of those tools that was built just for our industry. It's really meant to help construction companies, but largely, you know, that's maybe only a quarter to a third of the whole industry is actually doing those. The rest might be torturing Excel to do something for them, you know, or they're still using paper forms or whatever. But you know, this is an area that really could have a lot of growth, and I'm sure, Brian, you agree with that.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. Yeah. And you know, when I look at this, I see, okay, so 45% are not using, you know, any kind of software to manage their workforce. Um, and I get it because I completely understand it's really hard. It is to adopt and implement new software. It's challenging. And so, you know, when I look at this, I think, well, there's a lot that we can learn from this at Procore and really across all construction technology companies as we look at this. How do we make the software that is out there and available for workforce management easier to adopt, easier to understand, easier to implement, especially in the field? And this is one of the reasons why we actually have customer advisory groups at Procore, and I love working with our specialty contractor customer advisory board because they're so honest about what we're doing that either is or especially is not working. And so I look at this and I see, you know, 45% aren't doing anything, and there's a big group that are still kind of like hacking their way through internal systems and spreadsheets. But I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic about the future, about where things are heading. I know if we looked at these numbers a few years ago, they would have been substantially lower. And so we all have some room to grow. I think on the software side, we have a lot of room to grow in terms of making things easier to use. And I think that on the customer side, I think there's some room to grow in terms of being willing to kind of dip their toe in this and start to experiment and start to learn how they can be more efficient with software, especially managing the workforce, the most important resource that you all have in your organizations, and the one that's becoming more and more limited. And so I think we're at a really interesting crossroad here where the demand's going up and the software is getting better. So it'll be really interesting to see how things progress for sure.
Yeah, and this is pretty much in keeping with sort of a big takeaway we had from doing this study together when we asked all the questions we did about their use of software and roll them all up and looking at what they're doing in pre-construction, what they're doing to actually execute projects, what they're doing for performance analysis. There's still a big percentage of the people, nearly half really, they're still wrestling with mostly manual methods. And only 30% there, 31% are doing the commercially available construction software. And when you look at what it is that they're actually doing with manual methods, unfortunately, so many of them have to do with labor. This is what percentage of contractors is still just using manual methods for labor scheduling, for doing the daily logs and progress tracking, for labor planning, for safety reporting, production tracking, timekeeping. There is a lot of room for growth here and a lot of progress that can be made. So we're nearing the end of our time together. So Brian and I will share our thoughts with you in terms of key takeaways that maybe might be worth focusing on in the near term for you. Clearly, this workforce shortage will persist, right? There's no cavalry coming over the hill for this, right? So making the most out of what you have is going to be important. So I think retention's got to be your immediate focus. Right? Think about how you might want to do a survey or somehow engage your workers to determine their top needs, and don't assume you know what they are. Ask, because it's just the human process of asking is hugely important in and of itself. Show some visible support out of the job site and appreciation from your senior leadership. Think about those non-wage components of value proposition that you have to your workers. Get more creative in where you're going for recruiting when you are thinking about trying to find new talent. That Rework America is definitely worth looking at to rethink how you consider skills versus credentials. Think about those non-traditional labor pools and start building your own pipeline. And then it is just critical to look at how technology can improve productivity. How can you make more out of what you have to just come to grips and realize is going to be a limited resource that you have internally, and think about how the workforce management tools that are out there can really help you do the best possible job to take care of and to get the best productivity out of the folks that you have. Brian, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I completely agree, and I've said this a couple times so far, and I'll repeat it again, and it's on the slide right here in front of you. But the key to what I see, the key to success in surviving these labor trends is going to be recruiting, retention, and productivity, just as Steve laid out here. And it's going to be through real innovative, real creative ways of thinking about the future. And again, like I said, I see a lot of consistencies with those who are adopting technologies like Procore. But as I talk to these folks that are doing a really great job and look past just Procore and see how they're operating their organization, they're innovating more than just through technology usage. It's through their training programs. It's through their employee perks and benefits. It's through how they're doing, like we talked about before, offsite construction. It's really a ground up new way of looking at what does the construction company of the future look like. And I think that it's that mentality that's really going to start to unlock, how we're going to be able to survive and succeed through these challenges that construction is facing right now.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Brian. That's all we have in terms of a formal presentation today. Here, again, are the QR codes for any of the reports that I mentioned that you want to point your camera at and download them. But meanwhile, Sarah, have any questions come in through the chat box?
I think we covered so much in today's discussion that we have left everybody questionless.
Stunned.
And we've covered a lot of great things, so I know we're a little over on time, and I want to thank you both for this excellent presentation and this great insight. Such a good discussion. I know I'm going to go back and watch the recording again. This has been very helpful. And I want to remind everybody listening that this is part of a series we're doing on key trends. So keep an eye out for future webinar information, and thank you both again for this excellent webinar this afternoon.